Hospitality is outward focused. Serving is outward focused. And Peter says, as someone who is a follower of Christ, you need to leave this life and you need to live this life. Get over yourself. So how do we do that? How do we make that happen? How does a Christian, this is the question, how does a Christian live in the world? How do I live this way instead of this way? Sorry, can't find the mic to cover it. The sad thing, and the somewhat ironic thing, is that a lot of times we try to live that kind of life by looking in the mirror. What we do is we get this idea that if I'm going to be a better Christian, I need to isolate myself. I need to remove myself so I can spend more time with myself, making myself a better Christian. We talk about things like my personal relationship with Jesus, which is a great thing. It's a wonderful thing that we have the possibility to have a relationship with the God of the universe. But when we spend all of our time thinking about my personal relationship with Jesus, what am I doing? I'm looking in the mirror again. And I'm choosing to not think about this. See, Christianity is all about others. That was the whole point of Jesus. Did Jesus spend time by himself? Yes. He went up into the mountains to pray. He went and he secluded himself for 40 days. But why did he do that? To prepare himself to get out into the world. To prepare himself to live life through the window. The end goal was not to look in the mirror. You see, sometimes we take what is supposed to be something that aids us in our Christian life and we make that the end of our Christian life. As long as I'm spending time every day reading the Bible, then I'm doing great. No. You read the Bible, why? So you can live like Jesus. Reading the Bible, spending time, that's practice for the performance. And when we take this idea that Christianity is something that's me-focused, we've not moved at all. We're still living the way we always lived. We're just doing it a little differently. And so Peter says, look, you've got to get past this idea of being inwardly focused, and you need to learn to be externally focused. But how do I do that? And we go back to verses 1 and 2 where Peter gives us that answer. How does that happen? How do I become someone who is focused on others instead of on myself? Verse 1, therefore, since Christ suffered in his body, arm yourselves also with the same attitude, because he who has suffered in his body is done with sin. As a result, he does not live the rest of his earthly life for evil human desires. How do I get to that point where I can say, I'm done with sin, I no longer live for evil desires? Peter says that happens through suffering. And we need to take a minute to unpack what that really means, because if we think about it, it can be a little bit confusing. See, I know that people who have suffered still sin. So I know that Peter's not saying once you suffer, you never sin anymore. Because I know that people who have suffered still sin. And I also know that sometimes suffering doesn't lead to good things. Because I know people who have suffered, and it has turned them bitter. And it has turned them against God. And so I know that this isn't a one-for-one equation, that if I suffer, things will be good. There's got to be something more to what Peter's saying here. There's got to be something beyond just this idea that as long as you suffer, everything's going to be good. And what is it? Well, I think the key is to understand two things. It's to understand the nature of the suffering that Peter is talking about, but also to understand what our relationship to that suffering is. You see, we suffer, I'm going to really generalize here, we suffer really for two reasons. The first reason that people suffer is that we don't know. There's a lot of suffering in the world that happens and we just cannot explain it. Earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes. There's no way that we can give a reason why that happened. People get sick, people die, people get injured. These are all things, they happen and they seem kind of senseless. What we do know, what we do have great confidence, what we have faith in, is that God works in all of those situations to bring about His will, to bring glory to Himself, and for the benefit of those who are called according to His name. But that doesn't mean we can explain why it happens. There is suffering out there that happens, and if we try to explain why it happens, we end up just looking foolish. But there are those times when we suffer because of ourselves. Many, many, many years ago, when I was a youth pastor over on the other side of the state, we did this game. We had a big activity night for our junior highers, and we did a game that we've done it here a couple times, where we got a bunch of boxes, and we turned the boxes into cars. They didn't run or anything, but you'd hollow the box out so that there was no top or bottom to it, and then you'd cut it into the shape of a car, and you tape some paper plates to it to make wheels, and then the kids would hold on to them and run around. It was great fun. We'd spray paint them to make them look cool. Well, we were doing this activity over in Clare, and because of the junior high activity, the rule was that the adult leaders did all the box cutting. So there I was doing the box cutting, and my wife, who is very wise, and as the story will illustrate, far wiser than I, says, "David, don't cut towards yourself." And I said, as a man, "I'm fine. This is fine." And so I just kept cutting off and looked down and, "Oh yeah, that's why you don't cut." And a big flap of skin just kind of coming off my hand. And my wife, who is a nurse, whose medical opinion I should trust, says, "You need to go get stitches." And I, being a man, said, no, I'm fine. Let's just tape it up and go. And also, hey, I'm in charge of this activity. We got to keep the activity going. So we taped it up, bandaged it up, and went on with the activity. And, next morning, looked at it. Yeah, still flap there, but, really don't need stitches. It'll heal up. And so it began to heal up and kind of developed a really cool scar there. A couple weeks later, it was Christmas, and we were down with Mary Ann's family in Dayton. And I noticed that where the scar was on my hand, it was kind of starting to bubble up. I thought, that's strange. And I thought, you know what? Probably there was something in there. Have you ever gotten a sliver that goes in so deep you can't get it out, and eventually it works its way out? I thought, probably something got in there, and it's just trying to work its way out. It's a little bit of infection. Being in Ohio, we can't go to see our doctor, so we ended up going to the Medi Center, and I showed her to that. I said, I think there's something in there, and it's bubbling up. And she thought that was probably true also. But she also thought it would be good to remove whatever it was that was doing that. So she numbed my hand up, and I'm sure it wasn't the case, but I think she got a shovel and started digging into my hand. And I tell you what, she dug and she dug and she dug, and she just kept on digging, and she didn't find anything. And before long, I had a really big hole in my hand. And she never found anything. I don't know what it was. So, okay, so bandaged it back up, and away we went. She gave me some antibiotics, and we called it good. Woke up the next morning, and I had these strange spots on my arm. I was strange up into my shoulder, too. And I said, Mary Ann, I got these strange spots. What do you think it is?